Aloha, namaste. Welcome tonight to Yoga Wisdom of the Bhagavad Gita. My name is Janapati Das. It's so wonderful to have you tuning in tonight, so please let me offer my respects to you for tuning in tonight to hear from the wonderful Bhagavad Gita as it is, as translated by A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. I'll just show you the book. There's our dear spiritual grandfather, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. So let me offer my respectful obeisances to my spiritual grandfather, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, who translated this Bhagavad Gita, and we put entitled Bhagavad Gita as it is. And I'd like to also take this opportunity to offer my most humble obeisances to my spiritual Master Jagat Guru Siddha Swarupananda Paramahamsa Srila Prabhupada, the dear disciple of our spiritual grandfather A.C. Bhaktivedanta, whose mercy it's all that I'm made of, and all that I can teach you about Bhagavad Gita I have learned only from my Guru Dev and from A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. So I eternally offer my respectful obeisances in my head at the feet of my dear Guru Dev and my dear spiritual grandfather. So tonight, as we do every month, delve a little bit into the Bhagavad Gita as it is. And the Bhagavad Gita is like, as my spiritual teacher would say, you come in a desert not having any food, and you come into this great banquet hall of so much delicious meals, and which is the yoga wisdom, the wisdom of the Bhagavad Gita, the wisdom of the Srimad Bhagavatam, the wisdom of Vedic knowledge, the absolute truth, Bhakti Yoga, and you just take a little bit at a time to nourish yourself. And this is the same way. You can meditate upon the Bhagavad Gita every day. You read a verse, read the purport by His Divine Grace. The book, of course, is very wonderful because it has purports by Bhaktivedanta Swami that are very thorough and very informative on the wisdom of the Bhagavad Gita, the wisdom of yoga wisdom. So, that being said, and of course, the pinnacle of absolute knowledge, as taught by the Supreme Lord, Lord Chaitanya himself, is the hearing and repeating of the names of God, which is what we're going to do now. We're going to do some kirtan. So please take this opportunity to immerse yourself in the yoga sound, transcendental sound. Just rest your hearts, rest your minds. Namo Siddha Swarupananda Paramahamsa Namine Gora Karuna Swarupaya Radha Krishna Kristaya Namo Siddha Swarupananda Paramahamsa Namine Gora Karuna Swarupaya Radha Krishna Kristaya Vajshri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nitya Vasudego Bhagavata Vajashri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadara Shri Vasudego Bhakta-vrinda Haribo Nitago Nitago Haribo Haribo Nitago Nitago Haribo Haribo Nitago Nitago Haribo Nitago Nitago Haribo Nityananda Chaitanya Nityananda Chaitanya Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Jaya, Gurudev, Jaya Jaya, Gauranga, Jaya Jaya, Gurudev, Jaya Jaya, Shiva Prabhupada, Jaya Jaya, Gurudev, Jaya Jaya, Shiva Prabhupada. Haribol. Haribol. Welcome tonight. We are going to read tonight from the Bhagavad Gita as it is by A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. I'm gonna try something a little different. I haven't done this in a while. Usually I read one or two verses or three verses. I'd like to actually read all the way through chapter 5. So if you have a copy of this, you can follow along. If you don't, you can always get one and read through chapter 5 yourself. This is a chapter, a little bit of a backstory. I mean, maybe a lot of people know the backstory of this Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavad means in Sanskrit the Supreme Personality of Godhead, or God. And Gita is a song. And this wonderful treatise of the Bhagavad Gita was spoken on a great battlefield before the battle of Kurukshetra some 5,000 years ago. And the conversation really only lasted about 30 minutes because it was right in the middle of the battlefield with two opposing armies on opposite sides. And in the center, as you can see here, you have Krishna, who is driving the chariot of his devotee and friend Arjuna, Prince Arjuna, during the battle of Kurukshetra. And this conversation is a conversation that was enacted and it happened in this particular time in history before a great battle. So, like I've said before, the modern warfare is not the same kind of etiquette as it what used to be. It's like we don't just go randomly, willy-nilly, dropping bombs or attacking people, or just slaughtering men, women, and children, or whatever. The battle was fought by great warriors of men who were kshatriyas, or great warriors, and there was a whole slew of kshatriya, or warrior etiquette. And one of them was that you start the battle at the same time, and the armies will be up, usually check out things, see the strategy. They allow these kinds of things to happen. The warriors would admire their enemy's ability, and many times at the end of the battle, this of course the battle of Kurukshetra lasted for many weeks, and after the end of the battle for the day, it's kind of like you go to work from 8 to 5 or something. You start work at 8 and you go to 5, and the battle was like a certain amount of time, and the sun was going down. It didn't just continue; they would stop. Everybody would go. The wounded would be collected, or the killed soldiers or whatever would be collected, and then the warriors from opposing side would get together and have dinner like brothers. It was they could be mortal enemies, but that was the etiquette. And so this kind of is very amazing. I don't think anyone could really imagine the amount of controlled mind and controlled ability that these warriors had at that time. But this was a situation. And Arjuna, of course, had a dilemma. And this is the dilemma, of course, was whether or not to fight in this battle or to go off and be a renunciate yogi. We've had this class before where we talked about what it really means to be a true yogi, and what Arjuna had in mind of what was a yogi and what a real yogi is, And so Arjuna had this dilemma, and he was not wanting to fight because he saw his brothers and his relatives and his friends and his teachers on opposing sides. This great battle was about to kill, which eventually resulted in millions of people losing their lives. Right? Just incredibly brutal and bloodbath of a battle that lasted for several weeks. So Arjuna had a fit of compassion, and he was intelligent enough because he was a great warrior. He was a great warrior, and he was a very spiritually advanced devotee of Krishna, and was able to understand that he had this dilemma. So he took this dilemma to Krishna, and Krishna acted as his spiritual master in the situation. And this chapter 5 is entitled Karma Yoga, Action and Krishna Consciousness. Now I'm just going to read through all the way, and then we'll go back and we'll read some of the purports that Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. But this is addressing a lot of the issues that Arjuna had, of course, and what Krishna was trying to explain to Arjuna. So starting with text 1, Arjuna asks a very important question. Arjuna says, "O Krishna, first of all, you ask me to renounce work, and then again you recommend work with devotion. Now will you kindly tell me definitely which of the two is more beneficial?" Text 2, the Blessed Lord said, "The renunciation of work and devotion are both good for liberation, but of the two, work and devotional service is better than renunciation of works." Text 3, one who neither hates nor desires the fruits of his activities is known to be always renounced. Such a person, liberated from all dualities, easily overcomes material bondage and is completely liberated, O mighty armed Arjuna. Only the ignorant speak of karma yoga and devotional service as being different from the analytical study of the material world, Shanka. Those who are actually learned say that he who applies himself well to one of these paths achieves the results of both. One who knows that the position reached by the means of renunciation can also be attained by works in devotional service, and who therefore sees that the paths of works and the path of renunciation are one, sees things as they are. Excuse me. Unless one is engaged in the devotional service of the Lord, mere renunciation of activities cannot make one happy. The sages, purified by works of devotion, achieve the supreme without delay. One who works in devotion, who is a pure soul and who controls his mind and senses, is dear to everyone, and everyone is dear to him. Though always working, such a man is never entangled. A person in the divine consciousness, although engaged in seeing, hearing, touching, smelling, eating, moving about, sleeping, and breathing, always knows within himself that he actually does nothing at all, because while speaking, evacuating, receiving, opening, or closing his eyes, he always knows that only the material senses are engaged with the objects, and he is aloof from them. One who performs his duty without attachment, surrendering the results unto the Supreme God, is not affected by sinful reaction, as the lotus leaf is untouched by water. The yogis, abandoning attachment, act with body, mind, intelligence, and even with the senses only for the purpose of purification. The steadily devoted soul attains unadulterated peace because he offers the results of all activities to me, whereas a person who is not in union with the divine, who is greedy for the fruits of his labor, becomes entangled. When the embodied living being controls his nature and mentally renounces all actions, he resides happily in the city of 9 gates, the material body, neither working nor causing work to be done.
The embodied spirit, master of the city of his body, does not create activities, nor does he induce people to act, nor does he create the fruits of action. All this is enacted by the modes of material nature. Nor does the Supreme Spirit assume anyone's sinful or pious activities. Embodied beings, however, are bewildered because of the ignorance which covers their real knowledge. When, however, one is enlightened with the knowledge by which nescience is destroyed, then his knowledge reveals everything as sun lights up everything in the daytime. When one's intelligence, mind, faith, and refuge are all fixed in the Supreme, then one becomes fully cleansed of misgivings through complete knowledge, and thus proceeds straight on the path of liberation. The humble sage, by virtue of true knowledge, sees with equal vision a learned and gentle Brahmana, a cow, an elephant, a dog, and a dog-eater outcast. Those whose minds are established in sameness and equanimity have already conquered the conditions of birth and death. They are flawless like Brahman, and thus they are already situated in Brahman. A person who neither renounces upon achieving something pleasant nor laments upon obtaining something unpleasant, who is self-intelligent, unbewildered, and who knows the science of God, is to be understood as already situated in transcendence. Such a liberated person is not attracted to material sense pleasure or external objects, but is always in trance, enjoying the pleasure within. In this way, the self-realized person enjoys unlimited happiness, for he concentrates on the Supreme. An intelligent person does not take part in the sources of misery, which are due to the contact with material senses. O son of Kunti, such pleasures have a beginning and an end, and so the wise man does not delight in them. Before giving up this present body, if one is able to tolerate the urges of the material senses, check the force of desire and anger, he is a yogi and is happy in this world. One whose happiness is within, who is active within, who rejoices within, and is illumined within, is actually the perfect mystic. He is liberated in the Supreme, and ultimately he attains the Supreme. Those who are free from anger and all material desires, who are self-realized, self-disciplined, and constantly endeavoring for perfection, are assured of liberation in the Supreme in the very near future. Shutting out all external sense objects, keeping the eyes and vision concentrated between the two eyebrows, suspended the inward and outward breaths within the nostrils, thus controlling the mind, senses, and intelligence, the transcendentalist becomes free from desire, fear, and anger. One who is always in this state is certainly liberated. The sages, knowing me as the ultimate purpose of all sacrifices and austerities, the supreme lord of all planets and demigods, and the benefactor and well-wisher of all living entities, attains peace from the pangs of material miseries. Okay, so that's really wonderful, and so many beautiful things that are brought up in this chapter. We'll read some of the purports and talk about the meaning behind this. So, the karma yoga, action in Krishna consciousness. So, as we were pointing out, there was a situation where Arjuna presented a dilemma that he had in his life, and he laid out basically all of these reasons and these religious rituals and rules and regulations in the Vedic system that basically keep the material society together in the Vedic system. You know, things that you're supposed to do, you're not supposed to do, ways that women and men interact, different kinds of rules of warfare, and a lot of different kinds of things. And he was making very good material arguments for this situation where he saw the bodies of all the relatives that he had in his friends and his teachers on the battlefield that he related to externally, basically. But what Krishna laid out was basically saying right off the bat, after Arjuna kind of threw down his bow and said, "I'm not going to fight," Krishna kind of laughed. He said, while speaking like a wise man, a learned man, you're acting like a fool, basically, is what he was saying. That he says the sage or the sober person does not lament for the living or the dead. Now that statement right away, he was saying, okay, you're lamenting for these people on the battlefield that you think are your family, and you laid out this whole thing that had to do with all kinds of rules and regulations that had to do with the body and the maintenance of the body, or the maintenance of a collection of bodies in society, So we had all these rules, but everything, there was no real like spiritual concept of the spirit soul. And that's what Krishna immediately establishes when he says in the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2, verse 12, when he says, before that he's saying, you're speaking like a fool, that no one laments for the living. The wise man doesn't lament for the living or the dead. Never was there a time when you did not exist, or all these kings on the battlefield, nor me, nor will in the future any of us cease to be. So that's a pretty radical statement. And then that opens up this whole conversation in chapter 2 about the living entity not being the body. This saying that we have in Sanskrit, aham brahmasmi, I am spirit soul. I am not the material body. I am not the material mind. I am not these labels or designations that we've created. And there are so many different kinds of meditations that you can do to realize that you're not the body, right? That we've discussed before. But that is the beginning. I am not the body, nor all these kings are all the body. Their body will die regardless if they're going to fight now or fight later, right? And so that was one of the most... it's a very radical thing, but it's, when you're learning about spiritual life, and you learn from your spiritual master initially that you're not the body, you are actually a spiritual entity, part and parcel of Krishna, and that you are not the supreme spirit, but you are a dominated parcel of the spirit. You are the servant of the supreme, and that you have a function to render loving service. So the third one, of course, is render your function in this world of what you're supposed to do once you realize that you are not the body and not the mind, that the temporary body will die. And so Krishna was making this point that these people are going to die already, but whether you do this or not, whether you go off and you renounce your work, which is what brings us to this chapter 5, right? All the subsequent verses after 2, but 5 what we're talking about today. The action in Krishna consciousness, the rendering, the Sanatana Dharma, your eternal function of rendering loving service to God. That's our eternal function, right? So, of the living entity. So, karma, of course, as we know, it's not a word that most people really understand. They think it's some kind of reaction, right? So we know that karma actually means action or an activity, right? So we have activities in this embodied state. We're in this embodied state, right? Verse 2, chapter 13 says, as the embodied soul continually passes through boyhood to youth to middle age to old age, a soul similarly passes into another body at the time of death, right? And that if you have the knowledge, if you have the understanding, if you have the wisdom of the Bhagavad Gita, you understand that this is what happens with the living entity in material bodies. This is the very basic of understanding. And so it says that the sober person, right? They refer to this as diras, right? A sober person who's sober is not drunk, right? They're very clear-headed. They're a sage. They're a person in knowledge, in true transcendental knowledge, and they understand this, and they are not bewildered. So we come across in this chapter 5 many times where there's references to being unbewildered, the sage being unbewildered, because they understand that despite whatever is going on in the body, that's not even a designation of who we really are. So there's so much unhappiness from the desire to try to enjoy fruitive activities, or enjoy the activities of what kind of karma, what kind of activities we do in this world, right? And this is what actually creates misery, because of the very basic misunderstanding that we are not the body and we're not the mind. So any kind of designation, male, female, black, white, American, Ukrainian, Israeli, Palestinian, whatever these kinds of labels, tall, short, fat, old, young, these are all designations of the body. They don't really refer to the living entity, the spirit soul. And there's a lot in chapter 2. You can read about the soul being dazzling and not being able to be withered by the wind, or the other things. I'm trying to think of the top of the destroyed by water or anything like that, right? It's eternal, immutable, primeval, ever existing. The living entity exists before the body, whatever body they're in now, whatever body they're going to be in their next life or in previous lives, if they're cats, if they're animals or plants or humans or whatever color their pigment of their skin might be. These are not who they are. This is a temporary designation of the body that we happen to be on, in the very same way that my spiritual master will refer to people, as being like an article of clothing that eventually wears out. That maybe even sometimes you might have a red shirt, and people are thinking like, there's a guy with a white shirt and there's a guy with a black shirt, and the guy with the white shirt doesn't like the guy with the black shirt, and he's saying, I don't like your black shirt. And Srila Prabhupada makes that point, that those are just your articles of clothing that will eventually, you just will be taking off and maybe changing into another article of clothing, right? So they don't have to do with you. So you don't even have to really react to the things that have to do with the temporary body and the temporary mind. We have to act. We have to do our actions in Krishna consciousness, understanding that we are spirit soul, understanding that we are the dominated part and parcel of the Supreme of Krishna, and that we have a function, and our function is to engage in loving service to Krishna as a spirit soul. And while we have this shirt or this body that may be different colors, different shades, different heights, different ages, we use it in the service of Krishna. And that's basically the analogy of that. So the action in Krishna consciousness, of course, is that. But Arjuna brought this question. He's very smart, and this is the beautiful thing about the Bhagavad Gita, is that it's set up in a situation that the living entity can understand the absolute truth by approaching the spiritual master, which is detailed in the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 4, verse 34. Just try to learn the truth by approaching a spiritual master, render service unto him, and humbly serve him, in that this self-realized soul can impart the knowledge unto you because they have seen the truth. Where did they see the truth from? From their spiritual master, who also saw the truth and applied it in their life from their spiritual master, and so on, all the way back to Krishna. And this is why we have, either in the Srimad Bhagavatam or the Bhagavad Gita, or other Puranas or whatnot in the Vedic system, this is the way that knowledge is disseminated, right? Through a spiritual lineage of great sages to great willing and worthy students who can receive this information. So this is why I offer my respectful obeisances to my spiritual teacher, and that when I teach these things, it's not because I'm creating some kind of, something from my head and, or reading things on the internet and pulling it. I learned these things from my spiritual master, and I'm trying to hopefully share this with you in a beneficial and wonderful way. But Arjuna basically asks Krishna these things, and one of this question at the beginning of chapter 5 is very important, because he says, "Oh Krishna, first of all, you ask me to renounce work or karma, right? You need to renounce the activities, right? And then again, you recommended work with devotion. Now, will you kindly tell me definitely which of the two is more beneficial?" Now, Arjuna had this confusion of originally thinking that he was renouncing the kingdom that it was promised to him and his brothers by fighting in this battlefield. But when he saw, he had this misunderstanding that it would be better for him to just give it up and not save the lives of his brothers and go off to the forest and be a yogi and be renouncing, And Krishna was saying that's not, there is renouncing where you give up things, but it may eventually help you lead you somewhere, but it will not actually be really beneficial without the understanding that who you're doing that for is really what the situation is, right? Krishna is asking him to do something. Your spiritual teacher asks you to do something. And then the renouncement is, of course, of giving up your will, which is what Krishna tells Arjuna, that just fight for me and offer this as the flower, the fruit, the leaf. There's another saying in the Bhagavad Gita later on in chapter 9 where it says one can offer a fruit, flower, or leaf and in devotion, and I will accept it. And really what it is it's the devotion that Krishna wants the love from the offering. So Krishna is telling Arjuna, offer me your fighting abilities and don't be attached to the results, right? That's the idea of real renouncement, is not being attached to it and giving, surrendering your life to Krishna in doing your work in the best way you can. In the case of Arjuna, he was a warrior. That was his ability to work. That's what he did. He was a great warrior. He was a Kshatriya. But some of us are not warriors. This is beneficial for us to understand as living entities, that in this life, when we come into this human form of life, we come with a whole load of karmic reactions, and we may have certain abilities because of that. We may be, like I'm a musician, I'm a teacher, I have some certain kind of propensity, so I'd be going out with my AK-47 and, fighting in a war or being a police officer. That's not my propensity. My propensity is to teach. My propensity is to teach people music or to play music or, whatnot. And that is my weapon, right? My ability, my flower that I offer. Everybody has a different kind of propensity, but anything is there's nothing really, I should say, that's too small that you can offer as a flower if you're offering it in devotion. So this is what Krishna is making in this question. He's saying that you're going to go off and pretend to be a yogi, but you're going to have to act. You're going to have to still do work, but not in devotion, but in this perceived idea of renunciation. You're trying to protect all these people because you want to enjoy these family members, and I want you to fight, and I want you to kill them, kill their bodies, I should say. So I'll read a little bit of this first purport, of course. There's so many wonderful things that are said in this chapter 5. It's really hard to get through all of them, but I'll touch on a few of them. In the 5th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, the Lord says, this is Bhaktivedanta Swami, the Lord says that work and devotional service is better than dry mental speculation. Devotional service is easier than the latter because, being transcendental in nature, it frees one from reaction. In the 2nd chapter, preliminary knowledge of the soul and its entanglement in the material body were explained. This is what we talked about a little bit. How to get out of this material engagement by Buddha yoga, or devotional service, was also explained therein. In the 3rd chapter, it is explained that a person who is situated on the platform of knowledge no longer has any duties to perform. In the 4th chapter, the Lord told Arjuna that all kinds of sacrificial work culminate in knowledge. However, at the end of the 4th chapter, the Lord advised Arjuna to wake up and fight, being situated in perfect knowledge. Therefore, by simultaneously stressing the importance of both work and devotion and inaction in knowledge, Krishna has perplexed Arjuna and confused his determination, right? This was with the assuming, inaction of knowledge and assuming that there was work in devotion and inaction in knowledge, and that they weren't really just the same thing. Arjuna understands that renunciation and knowledge involve cessation of all kinds of work performed as sense activities. But if one performs work in devotional service, how is work stopped? In other words, he thinks that sannyasam, or renunciation in knowledge, should be altogether free from all kinds of activities because of work, and renunciation appear to him to be incompatible. He appears not to have understood that work in full knowledge is non-reactive and therefore the same as inaction. He requires, therefore, whether he should cease work altogether or work with full knowledge. And so, read a little bit more, and the idea of sense gratification. And this is the idea of activity in the world, of doing things, the misunderstanding that I am my body, I am my mind, I am this, person from, I'm black, I'm white, I'm, Iranian, I'm Ukrainian, I'm Russian, I'm whatever, dog, cat. It's like all these things that have to do with the body and the mind and not the self. And my happiness is in doing work for fruitive activities, right? So there is this idea that the fruitive activities of a fruit, right? You do something, you get something back from it, and then with that activity, then you're able to enjoy things from your senses. But what Krishna is telling Arjuna is that if you do these things for me, you will still be using your senses, but it will be in service of me, and therefore it's non-reactive. It's not the same as doing activities. So you can have two opposing people, maybe both warriors like Arjuna. One is fighting in a war, he's making the money, he's just killing people for killing people or whatever. He's using his money and his life and his senses for his own enjoyment or for his extended family enjoyment. And that's a fruitive activity. Therefore, there is reaction to that. He has to kill things. He has to everything we do around us involves killing. We can walk to the store and be stepping on all kinds of living entities. We can be eating, and that's not even to say, the kinds of, when we get into eating, for eating meat, the kinds of suffering that goes to slaughtering animals and whatnot. So that's why we try to eat a vegetarian diet. We offer it to Krishna. Krishna doesn't accept meat, or meat, fish, and eggs, I should say, right? And so that's why in the next verse, Krishna is saying, the Blessed Lord said, the renunciation of work and devotion are both good for liberation. But of the two, work and devotional service is better than renunciation of works, right? And so then he talks a little bit about, Bhaktivedanta here goes on about the idea of fruitive activities, or activities that we do in this material world for our own enjoyment, which is why we're in this material world. Fruitive activities seeking sense gratification are cause for material bondage. As long as one is engaged in activities aimed at improving the standard of bodily comfort, one is sure to transmigrate to different types of bodies, thereby continuing material bondage perpetually. And then there is a quote from the Srimad Bhagavatam: people are mad after sense gratification. That's a very clear thing. Especially in the West, where we just like go wild. I mean, it's eating, sleeping, mating, defending. We're into eating, foodies. We are foodies. Whatever we can eat, and 60% of Americans are obese because we just eat, and we eat all kinds of bad foods. So, sleeping. We've got all kinds of ways of making our sleeping very good. People are really into sleeping, getting good sleep, yet it seems like people are having harder and harder times with sleeping now, even though they've got all the great contraptions, right? Eating, sleeping, mating. Do I need to go into that about mating? I mean, that's everything. Dating apps, all kinds of, everything that seems to get more and more about, sex, right? Eating, sleeping, mating, defending. Greater ways of blowing up each other or shooting each other. In the West, we have school shootings, and I don't know how that's defending, but that's the violence is increasing, right? We fight. We in an age of quarrel and confusion, so we're constantly, if we're not fighting in a physical way, we're fighting in a mental way, and also online with social media. We're constantly trying to prove who's better, who's right, no, you're stupid, you're an idiot, I cancel you, because my point is better, or you're one of the 5,000 comments in a scroll, and you think, if I just make a comment here, it'll clear things up right away. The 5,000 other people who think the same kind of thing. So then maybe you get 5 or 6 people who don't agree with you, and then they're like calling you an idiot, and then you're like, oh, you're thinking about it all day. you're like, when am I going to respond to those 5 people that's going to change their mind? And they're thinking, when am I going to respond is going to change their mind? That they may have a good point, but you're still thinking in your head, oh, I'm right? So I've got to defend my point, even if I don't have the best weapons to defend myself. So anyway, that's another whole thing. So this, another goes on here. One who neither hates nor desires the fruits of his activities is known to always be renounced. So that makes the point of neither happiness nor distress. We have in the Bhagavad Gita earlier the winter and summer seasons, right? This reference in the 2nd chapter that material sense enjoyment, material life is like the winter and summer seasons. Sometimes you have things that are, opposites. Happiness and distress. Really good things that happen. You feel good, the sun's out, you're going to Hawai'i. Never been to Hawaii, you're going to go out to there, and then, we get there and, maybe, I don't know, it starts to rain or something. We got a lot of rain right now recently. Or, so this idea of winter and summer seasons, happiness and distress. My spiritual master likened everything in life can be known by the seesaw on the playground. Sometimes you're up and sometimes you're down. You're going up and things are going up and you look really good, and then things don't go really good, and then I got cancer. It's like, or so-and-so died, or my favorite candidate didn't win the president. It's like, oh, life is really bad, and then it's like, but maybe it's going up again, you go up and down. So there's, the person who has an equilibrium. That's what my spiritual master says. You have to be on that equilibrium, and equilibrium is Krishna. When you're happy, you chant Krishna's names, and when you're sad, you chant Krishna's names. When you're angry, you chant Krishna's names. And you always remember that this material world is just a temporary place of happiness and distress. And honestly, the happiness is not really that much. It's more like cessation of like intense suffering. Like you're really thirsty and you get a drink of water and you're like, oh, that was a great glass of water. But no, you're dying of thirst and you drank some water and that made your thirst go away. So here Krishna is telling Arjuna that if you don't hate the things that are bad to the material body, and you don't overly go crazy about the things that are good with the knowledge that it's gonna, the sober person that we were mentioning before, the sage, understands that it's just a temporary, road trip, and eventually the end will come for that particular body, and you'll go on to another body. Or if you have the knowledge and you're applying in your life and you're focusing your life in service to Krishna, maybe you'll go back to Krishna, hopefully, as Krishna wants you to stay. It's not something that's really, the person is liberated, they said. They're liberated from all dualities, and they overcome the material bondage of the desire to try to find some kind of happiness by feeding the senses. So, we'll read a little bit of a purport by His Divine Grace. One who is fully in Krishna consciousness is always a renouncer, because he feels neither hatred nor desire for the results of his actions. Such a renouncer, dedicated to the transcendental loving service of the Lord, is fully qualified in knowledge, because he knows his constitutional position in his relationship with Krishna. He knows fully well that Krishna is the whole, and that he is the part and parcel of Krishna. There we go back, I am spirit soul, Aham Brahmasmi. I am part and parcel of Krishna. I understand that my service is in my relationship is with Krishna, that I should be serving Krishna with my life while I'm in this body in a human form of life, especially, because in other forms of life it's impossible to engage in these kinds of things because of your consciousness. Such knowledge is perfect because it is qualitatively and quantitatively correct. The concept of oneness with Krishna is incorrect because the part cannot be equal to the whole. Knowledge that one is one in quality yet different in quantity is correct transcendental knowledge, leading one to become full in himself. So the essence of being spirit soul, the position, understanding the position, once you understand Aham Brahmasmi, I am spirit, you don't make the mistake of being like, oh, okay, I am the spirit, I am, there are yogic monist philosophies, and call them personalism, or Mayavadi philosophy, that believes that we are all one, that we are God. But actually this is refuted here over and over again by Krishna himself in the Bhagavad Gita and by Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, that you have a position, and that is of dominance, being dominated, right? Being dominated, being a part and parcel of Krishna, and that you have a function, and the function is to serve Krishna. If you are Krishna, there is no function, and therefore there is no purpose of work in that matter, because you will just be the whole. But that's a whole other thing to get into about the difference between personalism and impersonalism. There is no duality in his mind, because whatever he does for Krishna. Being thus freed on the platform of duties, he is liberated even in the material world. So much wonderful thing, quotes in here, and so many purports. I would love to read them all, and I've read some of these before. You can go back and listen to some of the videos, but I'm going to read the very last verse, because I like how it's summed up. The last verse is the sages, right? The sober ones, the ones who have the knowledge of Krishna consciousness. Knowing me as the ultimate purpose of all sacrifices and austerities, the Supreme Lord of all planets and demigods, and the benefactor and well-wisher of all living entities, attains peace from the pangs of material miseries. Purport. The conditioned souls within the clutches of illusory energy are all anxious to attain peace in the material world. Everybody is looking for peace, and if there is no peace if there is no understanding of who you are and what your relationship to Krishna is and what your purpose is in this life, there will never be peace, because you'll constantly be trying to, like they do, attain some kind of solution, absolute solution on a material level that will never because the material world is temporary, and its solutions are temporary as well. But they do not know the formula for peace. Nobody, everybody wants peace. Everybody says they're going to try to have peace. They create the United Nations. They have the UN. They have the NATO, and all these things that they try for peace, but there is no peace. In fact, we're super close to annihilation from nuclear war because of just war that's going on all over the world. And we just continue to push that. Even though we want peace, we continually push war. The greatest peace formula is simply this. There we go. I'm going to announce this to, everyone, Ukraine, Putin and Russia, and, Israel and Palestine and everywhere else where they're fighting. The greatest peace solution is Lord Krishna is the beneficiary in all human activities. So there's one God. Our God has many names, and some people are fighting over it as if there are many, many gods that are fighting in a great, pantheon of, Greek war or something. But actually there is one God. He has many names, just like I have different names. Janapati Das. It's my spiritual name, and my birth name is James, and my daughter and son call me Dad, and my wife calls me Honey, and so why wouldn't God have many names? Men should offer everything to the transcendental service of the Lord, because He is the proprietor of all planets and the demigods thereon. No one is greater than He. He is greater than the greatest of the demigods, Lord Shiva and Lord Brahma. In the Vedas, the Supreme Lord is described as Tam Ishvaranam Paranam Maheshvaram. Under the spell of illusion, living entities are trying to be lords of all they survey. Sound familiar? We are all trying to be little Krishnas. Whether it's what am I going to eat today, or what am I going to... I want to be on top. I want to be the great content creator for YouTube, better than this other people. I want to defeat that person in debate. I want to be president. I want to be world controller. I want to be in charge of the, whatever, the universe for that matter. From the greatest demigod to the end. This is the sickness in this material world. Everybody's trying to be Krishna, but there's only one Krishna. And He is the proprietor of all planets and demigods thereon, as I said. Under the spell of illusion, living entities are trying to be lords of all they survey, but actually they are dominated by the material energy of the Lord. The greatest trick, to think that I want to be on top, but yet we're all under control of everything around us. We're under the complete control of material energy. And we are under the control of death, too. We may be able to karmically achieve greatness materially, or beauty, or whatnot, but all those things fade and they all come to an end. And the living entity continues. Maybe in this life you're a Bill Gates, or I don't know, Putin or Joe Biden or whatever, controller of the world, the head of this Islamic thing, this head of this person, whatever it might be. Next life, maybe you're a flea because of how you acted in this world, what you do, what kind of actions you do. So, the Lord is the master of material nature, and the conditioned souls are under the stringent rules of material nature. Unless one understands these bare facts, it is not possible to achieve peace in the world, either individually or collectively. This is a sense of Krishna consciousness. Lord Krishna is a supreme predominator, and all living entities, including the great demigods, are His subordinate. One can attain perfect peace only in complete Krishna consciousness. So this is not a subjugation, it's more of an understanding that true peace and true happiness come from the service in the natural state of our service to Krishna, instead of in the service of ourselves, as supposed lords and lordesses of this world. We will not ever find any peace and happiness in the temporariness of this material world. and under the identification of this material world, or even in the renunciation for the giving up of something, but only of understanding who is the owner and controller of everything. As said in the Sri Ishopanishad, the Supreme Lord is the owner and controller of all things animate and inanimate. He is the owner and controller, and one should know, the living entity should know what is the allotted amount that has been given to him. You know, some of us have good karma. We may come into the United States, where it's a pretty wealthy country. We live pretty long. We have a healthy standard. We don't have a lot of austerities, so to speak. But what do we do with that? You know, if we have less, what do we do with that? So whether we have less or whether we have more, we just offer that flower to Krishna at his lotus feet, and understand that is our relationship to Krishna. So that's all for today, because there's a lot to be said, and we could go on and on about that, because it's eternal, it's ever fresh, and it's very wonderful. The Bhagavad Gita, the Song of God. The Song of God is an eternal relationship with Krishna that is ever giving. It's, you know, that you can go to the movies or pick up the latest novel from this, you know, this author or that author, and maybe it's a little tasty, but after a while it's just like, you know, it's got the sand with a little bit of sugar in it. You know, after a while it's just sand. The Bhagavad Gita is ever sweet, and it gets sweeter and sweeter. And the same thing with the hearing and chanting of Krishna's names, which has been given to us by our spiritual master and the spiritual masters before. Thank you very much. Let's chant.
Krishna prastaya bhutale Srimate Siddhaswarupananda Paramam Samichinamine Namo Krishna prastaya bhutale Srimate Siddhaswarupananda Paramahamsa Itinamine Namo Krishna prastaya bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Itinamine Namo Krishna prastaya bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Itinamine Bhaja Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Srimate
Advaita Gadadhara Srivasade Bhagavad Bhaja Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasade Haribo, Gita Go, Gita Go, Haribo, Haribo, Gita Go, Gita Go, Haribo, Haribo, Gita Go, Gita Go, Haribo, Haribo, Gita Go. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Rama Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Jaya Gurudev, Jaya Srila Prabhupada, 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 Haribol. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you haven't already, please go to our YouTube channel and subscribe, like, and there are always constantly we're adding videos and classes to the YouTube channel. Feel free to share the channel with your friends and the videos as well. Make comments. Thank you again for tuning in, and have a wonderful evening tonight. Namaste.